very bad way. 3 months, July, October. But now we're looking at it in harvesting. Totally redo what has happened here. Seem to have lots. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to Wednesdays at 1. And thanks for being with us today here at Advent Lutheran Church. We are starting with, we're in 1 Samuel and we're going to start with chapter 24. So if you have your Bible, you want to go ahead and turn to that page, chapter 24 in 1 Samuel. And we will get started here momentarily. I have 5 lovely ladies here with me this day in the library, and we'll see if anybody else ventures out. Maybe they're not venturing out in person because of the wind. How's the weather out there? Windy. Okay. Oh, and the word for today is windy. So maybe we should read Acts chapter 2 that says, you know, that the Spirit came with a rush like a mighty wind. So the Spirit's blowing out there, and we're glad that you're with us to talk about 1 Samuel chapter 24. So how about if we start with a word of prayer? Gracious Lord, we thank you for the gift of this day and this reminder that the Spirit is swirling around us even as we gather to spend some time in your word, to remember the stories that were foundational to us being followers of Jesus. We thank you for this witness that is written and has continued to be preached and told for centuries. And especially now during this Advent time, we thank you for the gift of the living word, your son, Jesus, who we anticipate being born just in a few days in Bethlehem. We thank you for his witness. We thank you for his life, death, and resurrection, and the power that it gives us for living in this world, in its ups and its downs. We thank you for the gift of community and the witness of the great cloud of witnesses and all the saints. We thank you for all of this day as we begin our reading in the Word of God in 1 Samuel chapter 24. Amen. Yoki. So let's see here. Speaker view is what I want. So we're good. Okay. So anybody have anything to say so far? Anything you'd like to refute that I have spoken thus far? Okay, so let me read a little bit here. We are moving now into the what they call the David cycle. We're moving out of the Saul cycle into the David cycle. And we'll at this point, we start to get a parallel witness in Chronicles. And so as we come back after the first of the year, I'm going to have you finish out reading 1 Samuel before we start again. This will be our last in person until after the first of the year. But when we come back, I'm probably going to have to let you know ahead of time, or we'll just launch out and do a little bit of review. And then I don't want us to have to read stuff that we just read, and when you have a duplicate witness in the strands. So we've got Samuel. If we read ahead in Samuel, then when we get to Chronicles, we won't read it again, or we may just shift over to Chronicles. But I want to do a compare and contrast to make sure we don't miss any of the cool stuff that's in the narrative. But it's very confusing, and I think this is why people oftentimes stop trying to read scripture, because it's not like reading a New York Times bestseller in the fact that it doesn't start at the beginning and move seamlessly through to the end of the story. You go for a little while and then you're like, wait a minute, I was in Chicago before. Why am I in Chicago now? It's like that kind of thing. Say that again.
I thought you said we were going to do Kings.
Chronicles comes before Kings. Is it? Am I
On my
backwards?
Bible.
Oh, I lied. Okay, you got it now. You heard it here first. Yes, yes, we'll be doing Kings. Same thing, but Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, where there are 222, there's a lot of duplication. So thank you for clarifying that, making me look stupid on the internet. Anytime, let me help you. A little humbling experience for your pastor who obviously doesn't know the books of the Bible. I need to go back and work on my Old Testament rap so I know where that is. Okay, chapter 24, verse 1. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to look for David and his men in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats. Which I love that. I'd love to have a bar and call that the rocks of the wild goats. I mean, I just love that name. He came to the sheepfolds beside the road where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now, see, I told you it needs to be the title of a bar. Oh, mercy. Now, David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave, and the men of David said to him, here is the day of which the Lord said to you, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you. Then David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. Afterward, David was stricken to the heart because he had cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord's anointed. So David scolded his men severely and did not permit them to attack Saul. Then Saul got up and left the cave and went on his way. Bless you. Afterwards, David also rose up and went out of the cave and called after Saul, my Lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground and did obeisance. David said to Saul, why do you listen to the words of those who say, David seeks to do you harm? This very day, your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you unto my hand in the cave, and some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not raise my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, see the corner of your cloak in my hand, for by the fact that I cut off the corner of your cloak and did not kill you, you may know for certain that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you are hunting me to take my life. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the ancient proverb says, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog? A single flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you. May he see to it and plead my cause and vindicate me against you. When David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, is this your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. He said to David, you are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. Today you have explained how you have dealt well with me, in that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For who has ever found an enemy and sent the enemy safely away? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. Now I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not wipe out my name from my father's house. So David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. Okay, let's pause there and see what kinds of things you see here, want to interpret, want to comment upon.
Was the fact that David was able to get so close to Saul that he could cut off his gown, kind of like, I could have killed you?
Yep.
That was
Yeah.
okay, because I wasn't quite sure what
Yeah,
what they were.
yeah. No, I don't think there
I
was
didn't know whether
any
there was something-
significance to the fact that he cut the corner off the gown. I think it was just that, yeah, that he got that close, that he could have easily killed him. Yeah. Interesting.
This was highly dramatic for the simplicity of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because it was very simple.
Yeah.
You know, Saul came in, they could have killed him, they didn't.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then they told him about it. You know, that's the part that I think is really dramatic, you know, because then you got Saul, who just went in to relieve himself and didn't know any of this was going on, you know, and he comes out of the cave, and then here comes David out of the cave, and he's, you know, what's he thinking at that point? We don't know. But then they have this exchange, and I marked as I was reading, you know, he basically, David is saying to Saul, I know you came after me. Okay. He says, you know, whom did you pursue? A dead dog, a single flea? I mean, it was like, what, come on. But I love this 15. May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you. May he see to it and plead my cause and vindicate me against you. And I'm thinking, wow, what if we treated our bad relationships like this? What if we just trusted that God would be the one who would vindicate us, you know, instead of, you know, having all of this not rebellion, but vengeance. You know, I mean, it's very clear. I think one of the very first verses I ever memorized, yeah, in the Missouri Synod Church, this would make sense. Vengeance is mine,
saith the Lord.
saith the Lord. You know, it was short. That's probably why I did it first. But, you know, this idea that we don't pay any attention to, you know, I mean, there would be no Hollywood. Okay, who's, you know, you got to change your ringtones so that we can all sing along, you know, make it, you know, like.
Mine's Journey. So.
Well, I have one for all the kids. So.
Anyway, this idea that, you know, think of all the stories that are films and stories that we see in movies and on TV and stuff. It's all about vengeance. You know, it's like, I can hear the hero saying in any number of circumstances, I have to do this alone. You know, this is between him and me.
Go ahead,
You know,
make my day.
Go ahead, make my day. You know, it's kind of like you.
Movies.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if at one of those points when you just expect him to say, you know, this is between him and me, if you know, Clint Eastwood said, this is between him and me and God. I'm going to go watch and see what God does. You know, I'm trusting that God will take care of this. You know,
Look, this is a little different, but I noticed that, yeah, after he cut off that corner of his cloak, David scolded his men severely. And I thought, you're the one who cut off the cloak. You did everything. And you're yelling at your men. They haven't done anything.
Exactly.
They haven't even tried to do anything.
Except I think what they said, hey, as long as you're there, kill them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking they said. And
Yeah, I can see that.
so
You know, why
yeah.
didn't you? What is this piece of corner of a cloak? What good is that? You know,
Well,
why?
his men did say to him, this is what the day the Lord gave you
Right.
Yeah,
to take care of Saul. So go
Okay.
do it.
exactly,
that's when he
exactly. Then there's the vengeance theme,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, so that the vengeance is, and God had told him he could do that too, you know, so, but then that David retracts, you know, and he says, you know, I know you said I could do this, but, you know, I'm not feeling it. You know, or we always talk about in the theater, you talk about, you know, trying on the costume, you know, so maybe the cutting of the cloak was just a little bit to see what it would be like if he were to walk away, knowing he could have, what would it have felt like if he had walked away having killed Saul? And that's where he gets this. How could I do this? This is the Lord's anointed. Say that real fast 3 times. You know, so I'm not going to do it. I can't do it, you know, so, you know, it's all on you, you know, God, if you want to do it, you do it. I'm not doing it. So I like that. But then it's really cool because Saul basically says, you know, wherever, you know, you've repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. So, you know, this would be another opportunity for Saul to let the goodness in his heart, you know, whereas the good spirit of God to reign in his heart and not push it away. We had been talking last week about, I don't know if did you watch last week or, but last week we had these, Saul just keeps going back and forth, 1 minute he's the good Saul, 1 minute he's the bad Saul. And it all talks about God's put his spirit in him at the beginning, gave him a new heart at the beginning. And then Saul, turned, and it's like the good spirit left him, and then God put an evil spirit in him. So we had quite the conversation,
Yeah. That's
but
what
we
we
also
came
had
up
the
with.
conversation about, wait a minute, God would put an evil spirit in. I don't like that idea that God is putting the evil spirit into Saul. But I think really and I did look at the Hebrew really has it's more of a not the causation of God, but God gave him a new heart, which should have been sufficient. And then Saul said, yeah, forget that. Saul rejected the new heart. And in the absence of the new heart, we got the evil, is now running unchecked because the new heart is not, keeping it contained. And I like that parallel, and this is a stretch, but I like the parallel with salvation. When we have conversations about, do we have to make a decision for Christ to be saved? And this is my biggest problem with conservative and fundamentalist Christians, that it's like Jesus died on the cross and that saved you from your sins, but only if you accept him as your personal Lord and Savior. It's like, no, I want to say, no, that happened and it was done, and the only choice that we have, it's not an either or choice. It's like you can accept the state of grace that you are in because Jesus died on the cross and that saved us, saved humanity, saved creation. Okay. Or you can walk away. And so this is a kind of a good underpinning foundational image for that. Saul was in a state of grace. He had a new heart from God and he decided not to listen to it. So it was his choice to separate from it. But he never had to say, oh, now I have a new heart. And when Jesus comes, I'm going to believe in him and make a decision for Christ. He got it and it was his.
It also doesn't say at what point you have to accept. I mean, so I had a pastor say to me, talk to us and say, when you're up there facing God and you say, oh yeah, now I know.
Yeah.
That's just as
could've-
good as if you were
Yeah.
raised a Christian through your whole entire life and did good,
Exactly.
tried to be.
Absolutely. And I think too, that there's lots of interesting conversation, scholarly writing and conversation around, like you say, we seem to think that once we die, the opportunity is over.
Mhm.
Why? I mean, Jesus is on the other side. God is in eternity, so if we just don't happen to get around to it till we die, it's not like, oh, you had a deadline, you have expired, you're
Literally. a
the
deadline.
opportunity has expired. And so now you have to go, someplace else. You're not acceptable here. I just don't, more and more as I get older too, I just don't imagine that that's the way God would deal with one of God's beloved children. I think God, the arms are open with everything that you need, and you die and Jesus is standing there ready to hug you, and if you want to walk away, you can. But then what is it? Is it The Great Divorce? I think one of C.S. Lewis's books talks about the bus that goes down to hell. Like every day there's a bus that if you want to get on and accept your state of grace, you can get on the bus and go to heaven. So even if you go to hell, God's going to continue to pursue you, and I like that a whole lot better than it's on me, because I mean, I most of the time I really like being the one who gets to choose, but that choice is like, I'm going to leave that, it's like, am I going to kill David? Because even God told me it was okay. Even God told me it's okay. I don't have to buy into this, but I don't want to be, I don't want to be responsible for that. I'd rather have God be responsible for that. I mean, so much easier.
Well, and that's what it says here in the Lutheran Study Bible. It said how easy it would have been for David to kill Saul in the cave. David resists out of obedience to God, who had anointed Saul. And he makes that very clear in his little speech there.
Repeatedly. Yeah.
This is the kind of faithful king that God wants. The king and people are not to take matters into their own hands, but rather to obey God. Later, Jesus will embody such faithful obedience in Philemon 2.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Oh, I'm glad I'm in concert with the Lutheran Study Bible. It makes me feel, I mean, maybe redeeming myself a little bit for the Kings and Chronicles confusion. So anyway, we don't, I'm assuming we're gonna get in the head. Spoiler alert. Okay. Never mind. Okay, anything else on that section? If not, I'm gonna go ahead with chapter 25. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. They buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David got up and went down to the wilderness of Paran. There was a man in Maon whose property was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. The woman was clever and beautiful, but the man was surly and mean. He was a Calebite. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. Thus you shall salute him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have." Hang on, here comes Lloyd. "I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherd have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, my young men find favor in your sight, for we have come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David." When David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. But Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and the meat that I have butchered from my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where?" So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all this. David said to his men, "Every man strap on his sword," and every one of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword, and about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he shouted insults at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we never missed anything when we were in the fields, as long as we were with them. They were a wall to us both night and by day, all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know this and consider what you should do, for evil has been decided against our master and against all his house. He is so ill-natured that no one can speak to him." Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, 5 measures of parched grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. She loaded them on donkeys and said to her young men, "Go on ahead of me. I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she rode on the donkey and came down under cover of the mountain, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. Now David had said, "Surely it was in vain that I protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. But he has returned me evil for good. God do so to David and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she hurried and alighted from the donkey and fell before David on her face, bowing to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Upon me alone, my lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. My lord, do not take seriously this ill-natured fellow Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, since the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from taking vengeance with your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be like Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. If anyone should rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living under the care of the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hollow of a sling. When the Lord has done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, my Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause or for having saved himself. And when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you to meet me today. Blessed be your good sense, and blessed be you who have kept me today from blood guilt and from avenging myself by my own hand. For as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, truly by morning there would not have been left to Nabal so much as one male. Then David received from her hand what she had brought him. He said to her, Go up to your house in peace. See, I have heeded your voice, and I have granted your petition. Abigail came to Nabal. He was holding a feast in his house like the feast of a king. Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until the morning light. In the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him. He became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord who has judged the case of Nabal's insult to me and has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has returned the evil doing of Nabal upon his own head. Then David sent and wooed Abigail to make her his wife. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, they said to her, David has sent us to you to take you to him as his wife. She rose and bowed down with her face to the ground and said, Your servant is a slave to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. Abigail got up hurriedly and rode away on a donkey. Her 5 maids attended her. She went after the messengers of David and became his wife. David also married Ahinoam of Jezreel. Both of them became his wives. Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish, who was from Galim. Okay, so another love story. All you got to do is, here's the recipe: 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep, 5 measures of grain, clusters of raisin, cakes of figs.
And a
Done.
husband who kills himself.
And a
or
husband
dies.
who dies when he hears the story. Yeah. Hi, Lloyd. How you doing?
Hello.
So there you have it. That's the recipe for how to get somebody to marry you.
And what happened with McCall?
McCall got traded.
Traded her in for a newer
Yeah.
model.
She got traded.
Ay, ay, ay,
Well,
ay.
Saul did that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he, Saul had given his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish. So I guess the king could do whatever he dang well pleases. Yeah. So, but you kind of wonder, if you got a woman who's got 5 maidens, that's pretty good. And then she gives him all this food to take care of his people and stands up for herself and for her family and for her people. And, why would he take another wife at the same time? That's kind of like, is this wonderful woman not going to be enough?
But that
What's
would
the
have
deal
made
here?
3. That would have made 3.
No, Michelle was gone.
she was very
Oh,
young.
okay. So
You
you're
know.
not talking that Michelle.
No,
I'm
he
just
married,
confused.
it's at 43, it says David also married Ahinoam
Right.
of Jezreel.
Yeah.
Is it
Both
the
of them
cynic
became-
in me that's thinking, yes, and David saw all those sheep being left
And he said,
alone and thought, I better take care of Abigail.
Yeah, I think that's the cynic in you. What, the 5,000 sheep and goats and yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it
Well,
could
they
be. I
probably
mean, he's
came
got a
with them.
shepherd's heart, he's worried about the sheep,
sheep.
These are little known facts, little known facts that we have. Anything else about that's pretty
Oh,
straightforward.
it says Ahoim was David's first wife
Okay,
and mother of his first
and the
son.
mother of Amnon, David's
Yeah.
firstborn. Okay. Because Ahinoam's name is the same as that of Saul's wife, some scholars have speculated that David married not only Saul's daughters, but also his wife.
Oh, my gosh.
So, it says here in my note, Saul's annulment of David's marriage to Michal was intended to thwart any claim to the throne David might make on the base of marriage. She will be returned to David just before he becomes king of Israel.
Spoiler.
I have wives all over the joint.
For as idyllic as David is,
Yeah.
he's got his foibles out
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Ooh.
yeah. Well, and the other thing is, people say, how come David had so many wives? Well,
They wanted.
have you ever seen, the what were the 6 wives of Henry VIII?
there.
I mean, the English kings, who would marry and remarry and, do all that kind of stuff.
Well, you didn't give him a son.
Primarily to
For
get a
heirs.
son, so they get
Yeah.
an heir, so to make sure that there will be many, many heirs to the throne. And the more heirs, the less danger there is for each one of them. And, and it's just like, I mean, people moving west kept having kids because they knew they were going to farmstead. And, by the time they settled and got their cabin built and their flocks grazed and everything, the kids were old enough to help out on the farm, So, okay, anything? I don't see any. It's pretty, again.
Susan,
Yes, sir.
are you on chapter 26?
Almost.
No, we were talking about 25. I'm about ready to start reading 26.
Okay, that's why I say you're 226.
I'm 226, correct.
Yeah, okay.
226. Okay.
Mel was here too, but out of
She's
sight.
listening. Okay. Hi, Melva. All righty. Okay, so let me go ahead and read 26. It's shorter. Then the Ziphites came to Saul. Don't you just kind of wonder? I mean, it's like these stories happen, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we got a whole nother group of people showing up. Where did these people come from? No backstory, no nothing.
It's like Star Wars.
Yeah, really. It's like all of a sudden you're supposed to know who the Ziphites are. And I don't even have a footnote on them. So, okay. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah saying, David is in hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite Jeshimon, in case you were confused as to where that might be. So Saul rose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul encamped on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite Jeshimon beside the road. But David remained in the wilderness. When he learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed arrived. Then David set out and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay with Abner, son of Ner, the commander of his army. Saul was lying within the encampment while the army was encamped around him. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah. Do I really have to do this?
No.
What? Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? Unless they're doing something, I'm not saying those names again. Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went to the army by night. There Saul lay sleeping within the encampment with his spear stuck in the ground at his head. And Abner and the army lay around him. Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hand today. Now, therefore, let me pin him to the ground with one stroke of the spear. I will not strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can raise his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said, as the Lord lives, and the Lord will strike him down, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now take the spear that is at his head and the water jar, and let us go. So David took the spear that was at Saul's head and the water jar, and they went away. No one saw it or knew it, nor did anyone awake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. Then David went over to the other side and stood on top of a hill far away, with a great distance between them. David called to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, saying, Abner, will you not answer? And Abner replied, who are you that calls to the king? David said to Abner, are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. See now, where is the king's spear, or the water jar that was at his head? Saul recognized David's voice and said, is this your voice, my son David? David said, it is my voice, my lord, O king. And he added, why does my lord pursue his servant? For what have I done? What guilt is on my hands? Now therefore let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is mortals, may they be cursed before the Lord, for they have driven me out today from my share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, go, serve other gods. Now therefore do not let my blood fall to the ground away from the presence of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul said, I have done wrong. Come back, my son David, for I will never harm you again, because my life was precious in your sight today. I have been a fool and have made a great mistake. David replied, here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for his righteousness and his faithfulness, for the Lord gave you into my hand today, but I would not raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. As your life was precious today in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he rescue me from all tribulation. And Saul said to David, blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will succeed in them. So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place. Okay, Saul, my goodness,
Bad penny.
you know, talk about your
Bipolar.
bipolar, you know. Yeah, three,
Two or three,
yeah. Yeah, and he just keeps saying, and he makes it pretty clear. No, okay, we don't get it. You're gonna have to read about the death of Saul all on your own, because we're not gonna get it here tonight, but yeah, Lloyd, were you talking to me or are you just talking?
Well,
Okay. Anyway, one of the things that struck me as I was reading this, it's like, the symbolism, and I'm sure there's some kind of symbol of this, other than the fact that he could get that close to him and take the spear and the water jug. But, the idea that, I forget who it was, that one of the daughters who came back and told one of the patriarchs, you were the guy who saw me on the road and took me, and I took your ring and your signet ring and your staff, and I forget who that was, but these props, it'd be like, it's like I want to do a whole thing on props in the Bible, because we got the spear that obviously, that's where his head is, so that they could find him. If there was a battle and somebody killed him, they would always be able to see where the spear was, and they could go and protect him or find him or whatever. And then water, obviously you had to have water in the desert. So, parts and parcel of his protection and his sustenance, David took away, which is pretty much really what he has done. Saul is in his debt now, 3 times.
But
So,
God put all those people in a deep sleep. No. Did he want David to kill him?
He wanted to give him the opportunity, you know. And there are those who make a big deal out of this, that this is like where we get the idea of the hero quest. That's someone who has been chosen to lead in all kinds of epic history, you know, and you know, like mythology and stuff like that, where once someone has been identified to lead, then they have to go on this, you know, this hero quest to, you know, get the golden fleece, or to rescue the, you know, the maiden, or to free the country, or to da 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 da. So some scholars have said that this repetition of Saul being released when David could very easily have killed him, based on David's faithfulness and willingness or unwillingness to do anything against something that has someone who has been anointed by the Lord. You know, so he's saying, okay, this one's in your hands, Lord. You know, you anointed him, you chose him, and you know, set him out as holy. And so you're the only one, you know, I'm not doing this for you, you know, so there's kind of two strands of thought going on here. Was this something where David was proving himself, that he, you know, no matter how many opportunities he had to you know, to slay this, you know, rotten, crazy guy, you know, or was it the fact that God was continuing to make sure that he was serious about being faithful to what God would have him do, you know, because he's going to ask a lot of David, you know, so what else? Anything else?
Well, again, the cynic in me is thinking, if you want to take over a throne, killing the king yourself seems like a bad precedent.
Yeep. Well, yeah. And, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, in the vernacular of modern day, you know, do you really want to marry the guy you had an affair with? You know? Yeah, you know, I mean, it's like, how far can you trust this person? You know, are you so very different from this first person who he had already made commitments and vows and, you know, legal entanglements, and now you think that's all going to change? You know, so yeah, killing the king is probably not exactly, you know, a good way to ascend the throne. So, and anyway, anything else that you see here? You kind of wish that you had a little more, I do, and that we had a little more backstory from Saul as to why, you know, he you know, he throws himself at David's feet over and over again and say, oh, you know, I've changed, I'm sorry, you know, it'll never happen again.
But he
But it
only
happens
He's like
does
addicted.
when he's got the weaker position. That's when he
That's true.
says,
That's true.
you know,
That's true.
seems like, you know, he'll chase after him, and then when he's the weak one,
Until
then
he
he'll let
catches
go.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or until he gets caught.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad used to say he chased after my mom until she caught him. So I mean, it's kind of exactly, you know, said Saul keeps chasing after David until he catches him. And then he, you know, he's like, oh, I
Right.
you know, I
I
didn't really
didn't
mean,
mean
I'm
that.
really your friend. Nothing, not a hair on your head will be. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you know what? We can get through. I'm looking at my arm. My arm says we can get through chapter 27. Okay. David in the service of the king of Gath. David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. He's finally getting the light here, seeing the light. There is nothing better for me than to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand. So you kind of wonder, it's like, David, you're the anointed one. You can't leave. You know, I mean, like, you're just going to kind of hang out until God dispatches Saul. You know. So David set out and went over, and he and the 600 men who were with him, to King Achish, son of Maoch of Gath. David stayed with Achish at Gath, he and his troops, every man with his household, and David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought for him. It worked. Then David said to Achish, if I have found favor in your sight, let a place be given me in one of the country towns, so that I may live there. For why should your servant live in the royal city with you? So that day Achish gave him Ziklag. Therefore Ziklag had belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. The length of the time that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and made raids on the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites, for these were the landed settlements from Telam on the way to Shur and onto the land of Egypt. David struck the land, leaving neither man nor woman alive, but took away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the clothing, and came back to Ashish. When Ashish asked, "Against whom have you made a raid today?" David would say, "Against the Negeb of Judah, or against the Negeb of the Jeremielites, or against the Negeb of the Kenites." David left neither man nor woman alive to be brought back to Gath, thinking they might tell about us and say, "David has done so and so." So such was his practice all the time. He lived in the country of the Philistines. Ashish trusted David, thinking, "He has made himself utterly abhorrent to the people Israel. Therefore, he shall always be my servant." Okay. So see what's going on here? See, this is a kind of an interesting thing. So we start to see David, who's trying to get away and just live life waiting, you know.
Kind of like Jesus and
Yeah, yeah. And yet, this is an interesting thing. Why would David go on these raids? And I'm not sure I have, the only thing is that that they were enemies of Ashish, and so he's doing this like just to protect the guy who's been hospitable to him. So that might be worth some reading if you like following this. Negeb means southland and refers to the southern desert of Judah. So this is south, over here. When you see the Samaria and Judea on the left-hand map, there would be south along there. So you kind of wonder what's going on here, because you want to think that David's a good guy and he's got these two wives and he got them rightfully, and he and Saul have now put distance between them, so he doesn't have to worry about Saul. And all he had to really do was kind of hang out and wait for God to do the work. But instead he goes on these raids. And
I have a footnote that says Ashish trusted David. David led Ashish to believe that he was raiding outposts of Israelite territory, when in actuality he was attacking all these other people.
yeah,
So Ashish said, "Oh, he's protecting me from the Israelites."
yeah,
Whereas David wasn't really doing that.
right. And so he's afraid that if other people knew that he'd get a bad name, and
Yeah.
because I think he is aware that at some point he's going to have to go back, to Israel. And I'm not sure, but when he comes back and he makes, this ties into, and I'm not real clear on this, I'm just surmising, maybe this ties into his decision to make Jerusalem the city where he's going to be king and also high priest, because that's right, right there, freeway
Yeah.
close to both it's in Judah, but it's close enough to Samaria. And then he ended up bringing those two kingdoms together, Samaria and Judea. So we call his kingship the united monarchy, because he united all of Israel under Jerusalem. I'm sorry, this is update on Warren. Nothing new. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there. And we could probably push through, but I'll just leave you with a little homework. So homework I'm putting here on chapter 28. Read that, and you will, and no offense, Saul, but Saul will die at the end of this book. So, all righty. Okay, and then I will let you know, but be prepared to move into 2 Samuel we're starting on the 5th of January, and assuming in person, unless the pandemic goes absolutely crazy, but we'll just plan to be here. Unless I know who you are. I'll send you in. All righty, so I will see you guys. Well, in the interim, I'll see you in other ways in my dreams or whatever, and then I'll see you here on the 5th of January, which is 12th night. That's a 12th day. It'll be 12th night when it's 12th night. So you guys have a good day, and stay rooted to the ground. Don't be flying away. See you later.